Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 32nd episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I'm one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How we doing this week, Tim?
I'm good, man. I'm losing my sanity to Underpin. I hate that guy, dude. It's not even fun.
It's the fucking worst. It's not.
It's not even fun. So those of you who don't know, there's this delve boss that you have to solo at the hardest difficulty. And the last season's boss, I enjoyed. I got mad, but I wanted to do better, and it was a fun fight, and I learned the mechanics. This guy sucks. It's not fun. You're just basically playing soccer with bombs the whole time and kiting. It's a kite simulator while kicking soccer balls. And yeah, I'm just getting geared to the teeth right now, so I can just pretty much cheese it. But that's the conclusion that I came to, is just get geared and then I just strong arm my way through. So I've been doing that, and I've been helping my other friends get into retail, you know, Johnny and Swiper. We're getting them geared right now, preparing for next season. I want to get them the Mythic Plus mount to see how fast we could do it. If we could get it before this season ends. I don't know. That's just a goal of mine.
You want to get them the Season 2 one?
Yeah, yeah, dude. Wouldn't that be fun? Get it. This is the last month. We have some time.
What do each of them play right now? I remember that Johnny is the warrior.
He is, and
Fury, right?
Yep, and Swiper is a frost mage. So we would have a frost mage, Fury warrior, Ret paladin, Vengeance demon hunter, which is yourself, and then Bubba, it would be the resto shaman. Pretty good group. Not terrible. I mean, there's
I was gonna say
better comps.
The God Squad.
But honestly, dude, for just getting the achievements that we want to do, we're not trying to like hit world first records or anything, you know? So
well, we got 2,000 rating with some hunters that were not very helpful to get there. So
yeah,
if we could do it that way, I'm sure that we could pull Fury Warrior to Frost Mage along too.
Let's get 3K next season.
That'd be crazy. I want 3K this season too, but
we can do it.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's hard to get the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I've been doing. What about you, big dog?
I mostly spent last week editing. My fiance had this big business party thing that I had to attend that she was hosting as an event, so I did that. I've been mostly, like when I have the time, flying around collecting the bonfires for the Fire Festival event, which I actually admit is it sounds weird saying it's a good time, but it is nice to go to all of these old zones and be like, oh yes, this place, and then, you know, kind of how we were when we were talking about Outland and Northrend and stuff like that. So flying around the old world and seeing all of that,
I enjoyed it.
Still a pleasurable experience. Yeah.
You know what I enjoyed? I enjoyed that doing the enemies one PvP flagged you, and I was like, oh shit. So I just put on my PvP gear and I actually killed a couple of hordes that were doing the same thing.
I was my druid form to avoid that exactly. I fly in, take half a second to extinguish the bonfire, and then I was out of there.
Yeah, I sometimes hung around for a little bit and then I'd kill someone.
Yep, that's what I've been up to. I mean, really, that's pretty much it. I mean, I did do a handful of time walking because I'm trying to get all of my alts up to max level and prepare for tomorrow, because tomorrow they have the event that is going to be the increased mount drop rates for all the legacy mounts. So
I'm getting them all.
I'm trying to get. Yeah, I'm getting them all. I'm finally getting dragons. I'm never gonna run Dragon Soul again. I'm gonna be so happy.
Me and you both.
But yeah, I do plan to go into Molten Core, get Sulfurous. I plan to go into Black Temple and get the Warglaives, just anything that I can while it's easier for me to do it. So that's what I'm setting up for. And yeah, it's been a pretty slow week as I edited last week's episode and read into this week's episode, and yeah, it's been a good time.
I'm excited for that event, man. 10 times the drop chance, and I have I have so many characters ready to go.
I already do have like probably 10 or 15 characters at level 80. So
at 80? Wow, that's crazy.
At 80. Well, with the Fire Festival event mixed with the time walking buff, you can get from 70 to 80, which is only the really challenging part, because I mean, the XP
Yeah.
slows down there. And I already had a ton of people at 70 that I just didn't worry about. All my demon hunters at like 50 that I never leveled. So I've been getting all of them up to 80 easily enough. And yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
I'm excited. Oh, bro,
And
I can finally finish my meta achievements for the mounts. Oh,
how do you feel and I'm a mount collector as well, but how do you feel the accessibility to these mounts? Like, are you mad that the 10% or 10 times change is in effect, or are you okay with it?
It did seem like a lot. I wasn't expecting 10 times, because I mean, what we're talking about is literally taking most mounts in raid from a 1 in 100 chance to a 1 in 10 chance.
Exactly.
So that's an insane leap, but also at the same time, like, I don't want people to suffer the way that I've suffered for these mounts, especially because a lot of them are like irrelevant, and like it's not like it's challenging or anything by that means to run Dragon Soul. It just takes a lot of time.
Right.
So,
well, and I don't think a lot of people are like us who have 15 characters ready to go. Because if you think about it, like month of July, that's 4 lockouts, right? 4 lockouts. So if you don't have 15 characters ready to go, if you just have 2 characters ready to go, right? You might not actually get the mount you're going for.
Yeah. So I'm for it. I've always kind of been for the idea of them adding like skips to legacy mounts, like what they did with Siege of Orgrimmar. I think that all that kind of should be maybe standard for legacy stuff, at least like 2 or 3 expansions into the past, because it's one of those quality of life changes that I think makes doing that content a little bit more fun, a little bit more accessible. So,
well, hopefully this
I'm
gets
for it.
People who haven't run legacy content to start doing it, and then they're like, oh, I kind of like getting mounts, and then it creates more people doing it.
Yeah. And I guess like the truth of it is like, sure, these mounts are fairly challenging to get, but by no means are these mounts like the hardest mounts in the games to get. So like, it's not like I feel slighted. I still have tons of mounts that are way more challenging to get in the long run, whether it's through some sort of meta achievement in fucking Nazjatar or whatever. So,
right.
You know, I'm not going to be outmounted by scrubs, and that's all I would worry about.
I think it's great for us who get to tie in our loose ends, you know?
I'm going to never have to run Tomb of Sargeras again. I'm never going to have to run Dragon Soul again. I actually think that's all that I have. I'm trying to remember if I'm even forgetting any.
Jaina mount.
I have
we got to get Gmod. We got to get Jaina mount.
And Gmod, yep. But also, I want to run those ones. I was trying to do a lot of those mount runs when this expansion started, because I mean, a lot of my characters like pirate transmog, a lot of my characters are trolls, so I wanted a lot of the transmog that do come from the Battle of Dazar'alor raid. So I mean, I'm happy to run that as well, and given that it's going to be pretty simple to get those mounts, I'm going to be happy to do it now.
And Jailer mount.
Oh yes, Jailer mount. That one will be a bit more. Oh, and
Sylvanas, yeah. Yep, see, I got the skips ready to go too.
But that is what we have been up to for this last week. And last week, we ended up finishing up the first novel that we're going to discuss as we move into the Cataclysm era, the Stormrage novel. What do you remember about last week, Tim?
Well, we cut it in 2 parts. So we did the second half last week. We started when the Emerald Dream was seeping, or had the nightmare seeping out of it, and like Stormwind, and everyone was falling asleep, turning into zombies, attacking people. So we can't have that, right? So I do remember Thura. She went in, saved Malfurion. Not just her, other people did too, but she was the one with the axe, Roxagar's axe of Cenarius. I remember Malfurion popping off. You couldn't get enough of him, man. Dude, I think he's just an overpowered kind of boring guy, but you know, to each their own. But he popped off. He popped all his cooldowns. He made a one-shot macro and somehow saved the day. I mean, I am oversimplifying it by a lot. Did we kill Xavius? Did we kill him? Or did Melchior?
So he's not dead, but they do say at the end of the book, like, he knows that Xavius isn't dead. He's just trapped in this area known as the Rift of Ulm that he doesn't even dare peer into because of how dangerous it could be even looking into it. And just for the people that play the game, the Rift of Ulm is actually the final room in the Emerald Nightmare raid where you will then face Xavius. It's that misty room of nothingness. It's that kind of void that we talked about at the end of the novel.
And so there was corruption in Teldrassil, right?
Yep.
So did we save Teldrassil, or did the party that went in, did they save?
Teldrassil had already been purified because they removed the branch of the corrupted branch that Fandral had implanted on the tree. So Teldrassil was already chilling at that point, but we're gonna come Legion see another world tree getting a little bit uglier. So
very good. But yeah, that's what I remember. Anything I miss? I mean, I oversimplified.
No, I mean, that's the whole point of this. If you guys are interested in the full story, we obviously have the full episode, so you can check that out. But we did also briefly discuss Brawl Baremantle and him kind of overcoming his guilt of losing his daughter back during the Third War against the Legion, and how he then becomes an archdruid, has his eyes that turn this golden glowing orange, and then he and Chandra's Feathermoon basically are the maid of honor and best man for Tyrande and Malfurion's wedding.
Yeah, they got married. They finally did it after how many years?
Like 12,000 years or some shit like that, yeah.
You know those girls that get mad when you don't propose after like 5 years? Well, Tyrande mad chill, dude. She mad chill.
Yeah, I got a lot of respect for her patience. So, yep, that was pretty much all of it. Thura goes back to Orgrimmar. Brawl's chilling. Luke and Foxblood disappears from the story forever. And we'll see plenty more of Ysera and Alexstrasza as we move into this next expansion of World of Warcraft.
What if we see Lucan in The Last Titan?
For what? For why?
I don't know, man. I'm just saying. He comes out, he's actually Azeroth. I don't know.
Jesus, that would be fucking... that would be something. Oh my god. They're just like, actually, I think we should make this character really important. But yeah, mostly just a lot of fight scenes between the corrupted dragons, the people that we know. And yeah. But also last week, we did have a few comments that we're going to go over now, starting with Farce Facade saying, and this is in reference to one of our older videos where we talked about how Tyrande didn't recognize Varian back when we were discussing his episode. And so yeah, the context for that, he says, to be fair, I don't know what most world leaders look like, and I live in a heavily documented digital age. So, and I also remember when I first bought, I remember when I first bought these comics, a fun read for sure. And yeah, I was right there with you. I was like, you know what? When you put it that way, when I think about this being a fantasy realm and even, you know, not entirely medieval and there's like magic and stuff, but like still they wouldn't have like pamphlets being like, vote Varian for leader of Stormwind. So, and yeah, I mean, even in reality, I doubt most of us know what the names of the majority of our legislator is. So, yeah.
But we know the president. We know the president, though, and he's basically like that stature, you know? There's probably paintings of him places and stuff, you know? I don't know. I do get it. I see both sides, but the king?
Yeah, I did slightly counter. I was like, I would also say that there are significantly less leaders in World of Warcraft than there are in reality, so that does kind of go against it, but still, regardless, I don't expect, you know, most people to know most people, but hey, I'll take it. I'll take any explanation I can get. But we did also have Tyler Forward 3327 saying, I've listened and watched your entire catalog over the last week while playing WoW and having it playing on my phone. Over the course of that time, I often found myself throwing up my journal in game to just look at the bosses and dungeons. I also listen to long-form content when I'm going to bed and quickly realized that I was too invested to fall asleep to your podcast. Keep up the good vibes and lore drops. I thirst for more. And hey,
that's awesome.
We're yeah, that is awesome. We're excited to quench your thirst as best we can. We're always looking to do that. So we're happy that we could do that. I even mentioned to him, I'm like, yeah, I have the I recently installed the All the Things add-on, and I myself also enjoy how with that add-on, like whenever you're running raids and stuff like that, you'll hover over bosses, and just on the tooltip that pops up, it gives you like their adventure journal entry. So I do enjoy that as well, being able to just read about each of these individual bosses as I'm kind of flying through my raids and whatnot. So we're happy to help you out with the lore, happy that you're enjoying playing alongside with us, and thank you so much for your support. Thank you guys all for your support. It's been a pretty awesome week. We are really close to 600 subscribers. We recently were approved for the first tier of YouTube's partner program. Over on Spotify, we're passing up to like 150 followers, which is already crazy considering that we were at like less than 100 when we did last episode. So things are kind of going well in all sorts of places, and it's all thanks to your guys' awesome support like this, so thank you guys. But lastly, we did have Nick Voorhees, awesome name by the way, over on Spotify, saying, the first time I played WoW first during the phases between Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm. I stopped during the Mists of Pandaria, and I just barely came back to the game, and needless to say, I've missed a lot. I'm overwhelmed by how much story I've missed, and I love this game, so I was determined to get through it instead of just dropping it again. So I'm glad I've stumbled across your guys' podcast, as it's filling in so many gaps that I missed when I was playing as a kid, making it a lot easier to catch up on the retail storyline. So thank you.
Well, it's nice because you read all the books, and then you tell us about them. Like, there's so much stuff that has happened in between, like right now. Like, this is crazy. We're talking about Cataclysm, and Malfurion was in like the Emerald Dream. There's stuff I never even knew that happened.
And I think that a lot of the reason that Cataclysm and stuff like that might be disliked is because it doesn't necessarily always make like the previous stories of Deathwing in the earlier versions of the game, like Warcraft 2 and pre-vanilla and stuff like that, super clear to most players unless they have read those books, unless they have gone through that. So yeah, that was kind of always the goal for our channel, is to be able to get those veteran players who have played the game for years to understand just what's going on, as well as giving that doorway for the people who haven't even stepped their foot into the lore, an entryway. So getting these awesome comments. Go on.
I think you were just tired of me asking you questions. That's why you're like, I'm going to educate you.
Kinda. I will also say, because we did have like a comment, I think it was over on Instagram, of somebody saying something similar to one of these. And I was just like, yeah, it is awesome to be able to have people to discuss lore with. Just in general, that is part of the reason we wanted to build this community. So, and to be able to have Tim understand some of the lore so that while I'm playing the game, I'm not having to explain everything to him, is awesome. But that is all that we have for last week's comments. As we move into this week, we begin the first part of the Shattering novel that is going to lead directly into the Cataclysm expansion. So we're just going to hop into that. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. So if you guys remember, all the way back in episode 7, we discussed that Thrall breaks free from the internment camps and goes running off into the forest, and eventually gets like super malnourished and is dying, and is eventually found by this shaman of the Frostwolf clan, Drek'Thar.
Our enemies will meet their ancestors,
who is the shaman for the Frostwolf people in Alterac Valley. And that's where we pick up with Drek'Thar is having these sleepless nights, really, over in Alterac Valley, as they do mention that the nightmare that he was stuck in has permanently kind of messed up the visions that he's been having, and he hasn't been able to have good, I guess, prophecies, because we have to remember that shamans kind of do have like this ability to speak with the elements, to have these visions and understand what's going to happen in the future. And his visions have become really not very helpful anymore. At some point, there was like, he wakes up in a cold sweat, and he tells his handler, or his caretaker by the name of Polkar, he's like, quick, we have to go to Ashenvale, like, our people are under attack. And then they're like, okay. So they send all these people over, and then nothing's going on. So word gets back to Drek'Thar, and then all these people, including Thrall, including a bunch of the members of the Earthen Ring, which are kind of the shaman circle of the Horde itself, begin to question Drek'Thar's ability to, well, interpret nature, interpret the elements, and they kind of see him going senile. So that is how Drek'Thar's doing over in Alterac Valley, and he is having these nightmares where he can see again, and as he stands on this lonely mountain under this crimson sun, he sees this ocean beneath him that just crashes with rage, and the ground beneath him trembles as the elements themselves screaming out in this deep primeval groan, basically screaming at him as the mountain beneath him splits into pieces, and he goes falling into this fiery mass of the ground, and the ocean itself begins to rip and tear at it. So he wakes up from this nightmare, and he's like, I have to tell Thrall, like, the world is gonna shatter. The world is gonna shatter. And his caretaker, Polkar, is like, yeah, Grandpa. Anyway, here's your tea. Have a nice nap. And he's like, no, I'm telling you. He's like, okay, I hear you. Thrall, yep. And he's like, I'll tell you what. If you're still worried about this when you wake up from your nap, we'll tell Thrall, okay? And he's like, okay. So he goes back to bed. And Polkar has like this revelation. He's like, damn, this man's senile as fuck. So that is the prologue to this novel, and it does set the tone for everything that will be to come. But that is just this brief moment that we're going to see Drek'Thar as we do move into one of our other main characters from this story, and he is on his way to Northrend, and there are a small fleet of horde ships to go and pick up the supplies that were left in Northrend now that the war with the Lich King is over, and they're going to load up all their supplies and take them back to Kalimdor. And this figure is Cairne Bloodhoof.
Take heart, young one. The Earth Mother is near.
Who, once again, all the way back at like episode 6, we mentioned is the leader of the Tauren clans of Thunderbluff. So he is a really old bull, a really old Tauren, and he has been around since Warcraft 3. Where his people were originally these nomads that walked around, but at this point in time in the Warcraft storyline, they've fully moved into their new home of the plains of Mulgore. But Cairne's on a ship. Cairne hates being on a ship. He mentions it. He's like, the Tauren are people of the land. We don't belong on boats. The sea sucks. He even mentions, he's like, despite the fact that airships also like are not the ground, I find them significantly more tolerable than even boats. And I hate being here, basically. But thankfully, the story opens for him as this blood elf lookout is like, land ho! And they spot land as they begin to make their way over to this area known as Garrosh's Landing in the Borean Tundra, which is just off the western coast of the Borean Tundra, next to the area that the Horde hub is in there, the Warsong Hold. So he's pulling up with these horde ships to go collect supplies, and he's going to meet up with the warlord that watched over the Northrend campaign, Garrosh Hellscream. And yeah, basically as soon as they arrive, they see a bunch of this, like, these settlements that were there before, and they're basically being ripped apart for the supplies that they're going to need, and he meets up with Garrosh Hellscream. And, well, he doesn't dislike Garrosh right away, but he does reflect on his father, right? So he thinks about how he was like, yeah, like, Garrosh's father was the first one to drink the blood of Manaroth. Fortunately, he did redeem himself by slaying the demon Manaroth, but Garrosh, who had once hated his name of being Hellscream, has been given this pretty zealous pride by Thrall, following Thrall going to Outland and explaining to him, like, no, your dad was a goat, and you're the goat too. So now Garrosh Hellscream is a super prideful orc. And Cairne questions, he's like, maybe he's a little bit too prideful. Maybe.
He's red, right? He's not green. He's not tainted with the fell blood or whatever it was.
Yes, he is a brown or red-skinned orc, whatever you want to call it, but they are what are considered they're called the Maghar. Essentially, these pure orcs that have not been corrupted by the fell blood. But, so, during this time, Cairne's considering his own legacy as his as a leader of his own people and whatnot, just kind of comparing it with Garrosh's. And he understands. He's like, yeah, Garrosh leads differently. Like, even though I am, a more seasoned warrior, even though I am a better diplomat and whatnot, like, the people of the Northrend campaign really respect Garrosh. They think very, like, he is a conqueror of opportunity. Like, all the times that they should have lost in Northrend, they didn't because of the willpower of people like Garrosh. So he does consider him, and he's like, if he can grow past his ego, if he can grow past all of this thing, he would make the kind of leader that the Horde would need. But this Horde flagship called Manaroth's Bones docks at Garrosh's landing, and they begin to, load up the supplies. He meets with Garrosh Hellscream. They have a little bit of a mental spar because, again, he's a egotistical young orc, and Cairne's an old bull who doesn't put up with no shit, really. And there is also the other person who's going to be staying in Northrend while watching over the remnants of everything in this time frame, the Elder Sourfang, who had just recently lost his son to the Lich King and all that stuff. So he is who is currently staying in Northrend to watch over Warsonghold, to watch over the Horde's holdings in Northrend following the war with the Lich King. And Garrosh is finally going to be making his way home after everything. But, well, they have problems, because as soon as they arrive, this nasty, nasty mist rolls in to the beach, and you see all of these orcs get super tense. And Cairne's like, what, are they, like, is it Scourge? Like, what are they worried about? And he's like, no. The Tonka, they call them the Cavaldir. And he's like, the fuck are the Cavaldir? And Garrosh is like, the Tonka think that they're these spirits of the Vrykul that have not been laid to rest properly. We know that the Cavaldir are actually the servants of Helya from Helheim. And they are Vrykul, but they aren't necessarily like spirits like the way that they're thinking. But regardless, apparently they're really good fighters, because it actually... he does mention, he's like, you see the orcs get tense as this fog rolls in, and Garrosh mentions that it is the fog itself that seems to give them the ability to go from the afterlife into Azeroth again and torment them and battle with them as they've been dealing with. And they see these sea wraith looking Vrykul that are covered in this seaweed and look like all basically undead. And it just begins this battle between these remnants of the Horde and these Vrykul figures. And, well, they do quickly realize that, because they're fighting with them, and Cairne takes his rune spear and drives it through one of them, and it bleeds. And he's like, well, if it bleeds, it can be killed. But also they realize these aren't like ghosts. These aren't spirits. These are just regular-ass Vrykul basically disguising themselves as spooky people to intimidate their foes. So with that, they do get pushed back a little bit. And Garrosh is like, quick, we need to fall back to this little hut that I got. I got a plan. And Cairne's like, all right, cool. So they rush back into this building. They barricade it. And the enemies are slamming on the other side. And they're like, what are we going to do? And Garrosh is like, actually, I was preparing for a moment if Warsonghold ever finished, and that's why I have these. And he lifts up a rug, and underneath this rug, there's this trapdoor, and it's full of goblin hand grenades.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, shit, sick. And they quickly swing open the door, and as soon as the door swings open, they toss these grenades out and just blow these Vrykul, Cavaldi, or whatever you want to call them, into pieces. And with that, Cairne actually does gain a bit of respect for Garrosh, because he's like, preparing for having a contingency isn't typical of an orc. So having Garrosh, who was willing to think this far into the future, is a good sign of being a good leader.
He's just happy. He's happy he had grenades stored.
Hell yeah.
Like,
I mean, it was either
leader.
that or being able to see into the future, not see into the future, but to be able to prepare for an unforeseen circumstance, like you said, is just not typical of most orcs. They're typically just like, oh, meet them on the field of battle. And Garrosh is that person, but to have a backup at least is a good sign. But with all that being the case, they do manage to defeat these Vrykul as they then begin to take all of their supplies and load them up onto the Kodos, which are these beasts of burden that the Tauren frequently bring, and just kind of carry around supplies most places. So they load up all their kodos, they load up the boats, and they get the fuck out of Northrend. After however long of fighting with the Lich King, Garrosh finally gets to go home. He, unfortunately, during this battle, Cairne did get nicked across the ribs with a broken spear, so he is slightly injured, but he is, he's a warrior. He's done this before. He's just a little bit old. So as they begin to make their way off into the Great Sea to make their way back to Kalimdor, as they see the shores of Northrend disappear in the mist behind them, and the bodies of these Kavaldir littering the beach and horde alike. And in a weird way, as they're beginning to sail, Garrosh and Cairne have a discussion, and Garrosh actually says, "I'm saddened to leave this place." And Cairne is confused. He looks to him, he's like, "The fuck do you mean you're saddened to leave this place? Do you know how many of our finest people died here? Like, you're mourning leaving a battlefield?" And Garrosh is just like, "It seems like it's been a long time since you were on a battlefield, Elder." And Cairne just like stares him down. He's like, "What the fuck did we just survive?" And Garrosh just goes silent, kind of a little bit mopey, I guess you would call him, but stroking his own ego, I would say. And, well, their conversation is cut short as this freak storm crashes into the Horde fleet. This massive towering wave that they didn't even see coming just washes over, and it knocks both Cairne and Garrosh to the floor. And they don't know what to do. Cairne hates being on ships already. Garrosh is not really a sailor. And as they get up, the captain of the ship, who's a troll, is just like, "Hey, if you guys could at least just get under the deck so that I don't have to worry about your dumbasses getting washed off, that would make everything so much easier." So Cairne grabs Garrosh and he drags him into the bottom of the ship, and Garrosh coughs up a bunch of water, and then he tells Cairne, he's like, "Only cowards and children stay below." And he's like, "Okay, and only fools die for pride when they should be helping other people to live." And Garrosh lets out like this frustrated yell, but he does listen to Cairne in this moment, and just as quickly as this massive storm came and washed over their fleet, it disappears. Before they even have time to catch their breath, the sound of the regular sea returns, and they return to the deck, and they see the sun already out, the light already peering through the sky as if this storm had already came and gone in the blink of an eye. And, well, unfortunately, some of their other ships weren't as lucky, because I believe it said that they had 5 ships, and now they're only down to 3. So they spend a decent amount of their time rescuing survivors of the Horde from the waters and bringing them aboard, as well as collecting what supplies that they can from the broken parts of their fleet. And as they do this, well, Garrosh shouts and points a hand off into the distance, and with this, Cairne looks over and he sees a lone ship, tattered and limping on the horizon of the ocean, flying the flag of Stormwind. And Garrosh's demeanor immediately shifts to, "They're violating the treaty!" Because apparently, following the fall of the Lich King, there was this treaty basically being like, the Alliance and Horde are not going to fight, at least for the time span while everyone is trying to leave Northrend and recover from this war. And Garrosh is like, "Yeah, but they're in Horde waters." And Cairne tries to explain to him, he's like, "Yeah, but they probably just got knocked off course the same way that we just did." And he's like, I give a shit why they're here. Then fate has delivered them to us," as he calls the crew to arms. And originally, Cairne tries to tell the people being like, "They're already going to die out there. We don't need to fight them." And they're like, "Unfortunately, Thrall gave Garrosh command over the Northrend campaign, and until he takes that away, we listen to Garrosh." So everybody prepares for battle, and the cannons unleash on this already sinking ship of the Alliance. And they make their way over, and as they get just within range, and they're firing arrows and they're firing guns down upon this Alliance ship, they raise the white flag to surrender. And Garrosh hops on their ship and starts killing them anyway.
What the heck? Dude, he's violating the treaty. The Alliance wasn't violating. They were just sinking.
Yep. So Garrosh hops on the ship. He starts killing people. Eventually, he does stop this slaughter. And he's like, "Bring me the captain." And they bring him the captain. And the captain comes to them, and he tells the captain, he's like, "You violated the treaty." And the captain is just like, "We were literally just dying out here." And he's like, "But you're in Horde waters. This is an act of aggression." And he's like, "What do you mean an act of aggression? We don't even have, like, a functional ship. We don't even have lifeboats on this bad boy. And Garrosh is just like, well, then you still shouldn't have been in our waters. So haha, suck it. But you know what? I'm a gracious warrior. I will give you one of our dinghies so that you can go run and tell Varian Wrynn what happened here today. So he does. He actually ends up giving the few survivors, including this captain, a small boat, and they go rowing back to Northrend. And he expects them to go tell Varian Wrynn exactly what happened here today as they continue their route back to Orgrimmar.
He's going to start an all-out war. They are not at the capacity to be able to start another war after fighting the Lich.
Yeah. But that is where we do cut to Orgrimmar, where Thrall
Elements guide me.
awaits as the gates of Orgrimmar swing open, and it is this massive parade led by Garrosh Hellscream at the front that comes walking through the front gates, and everybody's cheering. They're having a good time. They're like, the war is over. We were victorious. Hey, Garrosh is the GOAT. Yeah. And, Thrall just chills out, waits for Garrosh to get all the way up to him. And then as he does, he basically is like, you're a hero of the Horde. You're the son of Garrosh Hellscream, and to honor you this day, I have something for you. So he has his second in command at this time, Eitrig, who we've spoke about before, comes with something wrapped in cloth. And as he brings it over, he unwraps this cloth, and he reveals to Garrosh Gorehowl, the weapon that slain Manaroth, his father's legacy weapon. And he tells him, he's like, this is a weapon that symbolized both glory and damnation for our people. And as he's holding it and Garrosh goes to take it from him and he grabs onto it, he doesn't quite release it, and he says, you need to remember that this is a weapon not of conquest but of caution. This is a weapon that should protect the Horde, not lead it into damnation. And he's like, this weapon did slay Manaroth, but we need to remember that this weapon also killed Cenarius. So it is all about how you use a weapon that is important, Garrosh.
What's up with Gorehowl?
And
Is it like blessed or made with something? Like, is it just a normal axe?
I think it's just a normal axe.
I just don't know how this axe it defeated Cenarius?
Yeah, in fairness, like in the lore, there was a bunch of people fighting with Cenarius at the time, and even in the game, like Warcraft 3 that this comes from, you do have the people that were, like, you obviously have a ton of units because it's an RTS, and you fight with Cenarius, who is this hero unit, but it is almost strictly attributed to Garrosh Hellscream killing him. It was a legendary weapon used to kill 6 of the Garrosh, and that their hearts were sealed into the blade. However that works, I think that's just...
I mean, maybe it does something. The Garrosh are pretty big and powerful, and maybe, like, because that is the ancestors of the orcs, maybe that somehow, I don't know, empowers them.
Yeah. I mean, and it would make sense. Gorehowl has been passed down for multiple generations before it even ends up in the hands of Garrosh Hellscream. So, I mean, if that is the case, that kind of makes sense, right? So, yes, Garrosh is given his father's legacy weapon of Gorehowl. And it is probably one of the few times that we truly see Garrosh happy. Not just, a sadistic happiness, but true happiness, pride in who he is, pride in being part of the Horde and being an orc. And he swings Gorehowl, and they say that as he swings it, as it swings through the air, it lets out a shriek, which is where it gets its name of Gorehowl, as it slices through the air. So, after this happens, he holds it up, he's like, go Horde, for the Horde forever. And this parade turns into this massive celebration where they just start popping bottles and they're having a good time. They're celebrating the way the orcs do. They sing of battle. They sing of triumph. They sing of their ancestors and stuff like that. So it is this massive celebration to celebrate the returning of the people that led the Northrend campaign and celebrating the end of the war with the Lich King. And Cairne's not really with it. He's like, yeah, like, you guys do your own thing. This is how you celebrate. This is how you celebrate. But me, it's not really my scene. So we're going to get prepped. We're actually heading back to Thunderbluff, Mulgore tomorrow as soon as the sun rises. So As soon as that happens, we'll be out of your hair. And despite this, he does go to meet up with Thrall during this celebration. And as he's going towards the Grommash Hold, which is another one of these major buildings that Thrall kind of sits in, he looks up and he does see the Skull of Manaroth, a monument to Grom's triumph and the orcs' triumph over the Burning Legion. And as he makes his way inside, he sits beneath Thrall, and all the other leaders of the Tauren tribes are there. You have the Rune Totem, you have the Thunderhorn, the Winterhoof, the Rage Totem, and you have this leader of this clan, the tribe of Tauren, the Grim Totem, Magath Grim Totem, who is known as the Elder Crone of her people. And basically they're just shooting the shit. They're talking about, like, you know, the legacy of the Horde, how it came this way, and Thrall just talks about how the orcs never, like, they destroyed their first homeworld, and that he would never allow the fell corruption and anything like that to destroy Azeroth the way that it did destroy their homeworld. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty chill night. They're mostly just shooting the shit, having a good time, enjoying a time of peace for now. And with all this being the case, Cairne does think back to his own son, Bane, who we actually mentioned all the way back in Warcraft 3 as well, who does end up staying in Thunderbluff. He doesn't want to come celebrate with everybody because he says the higher honor is to keep our people safe while you are away. And getting this letter from his son fills Cairne with such pride to know that his son will one day be a great leader when he passes on to be with their ancestors as well. And as Garrosh is just laughing and drinking and basking in the adoration of the people of Orgrimmar, having a great time, the cheers for Garrosh are louder than anyone else. Eventually, this party comes to an end. Everyone's probably blacked out drunk, getting ready to be hungover as hell tomorrow. They actually do even mention that they're like, yeah, most people are probably enjoying the revelry so much that they're going to regret it tomorrow.
I'm just curious. Have we talked about I think we briefly spoke of the Grim Totem. They're not good guys?
So, the Grim Totem, we did briefly talk about them when we talked about the Varian episode, because it was implied that the, like, stone elemental that were in the pools of vision underneath, I think that's what they're called.
Yep, it is.
There was like this stone elemental that had somehow been summoned into there, and yeah, it's implied that the Grim Totem were behind it because Magath the Grim Totem has never agreed with Cairne's leadership. So they're not necessarily like bad, at least not yet.
What is she not
but
agreed
they
with?
Also,
like, what does she want that Cairne isn't doing? Like, because Cairne seems like a down-to-earth leader.
Yeah, I think it's just that she wants to be leader. Right. I think that's really what it comes down to. And that's actually where we do come into Garrosh standing outside in the night after everyone has basically gone to bed, and he's holding his weapon and he's admiring it when a voice comes up from behind him, a Tauren voice saying, "Your father was just what the Horde needed when it needed it." And he turns and he sees Magath the Grim Totem. And she's like, you know, for a long time I was unimpressed by the Horde. And this pisses off Garrosh because he points to the Skull of Manaroth. He's like, what? Was what we did against the Burning Legion not enough? Was what we did against the Lich King not enough to impress you? Or what we did? Yeah, basically he says that. And she's like, no, but what does impress me is you, Garrosh. What you accomplish, what you, like the power that you attract allies. I think that is impressive. And, well, stroking Garrosh's ego is the way to his heart, because he immediately gets diffused and is just like, you know, I don't entirely know what you mean, but I appreciate you, you know, stroking my cock. So it does begin to form this little tiny alliance between the Grim Totems and Garrosh Hellscream. Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. And come dawn, Cairne and all of his warriors, they leave Orgrimmar. They're moving through the Barrens to make their way to Mulgore. And he sends off his messenger that are known as the Long Walkers to go and tell Bane, like, yep, we're on our way home. We'll be there in just a second. And they're making their way through the plains of Mulgore, making their way past Camp Narachi, when the horns of Thunderbluff blast all across the plains of Mulgore as they see these Kodos that are lumbering forward towards them that have all these Tauren children that jump off of them, and they're celebrating by throwing these baskets of herbs and flowers. And he sees his son, Bane, coming towards him as well. And Cairne thinks that this is how people should celebrate. At least this is how Taurens celebrate. This is, with not blood and steel, but with family, with good memories. So Cairne's finally feeling like it feels good to be home as he goes to speak with his son Bane, and he discusses all that went on with Garrosh and Thrall and everything like that. And he even mentions, Thrall wants Hamel Rune Totem, who he mentioned is part of the Cenarian Circle, but a Tauren. Thrall wants him to go speak with Malfurion and the Night Elves because they have recently cut off support for Orgrimmar following the Wrathgate and everything like that. So getting supplies to Orgrimmar and stuff like that has been difficult without those trade routes. And Bane's like, yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And Cairne's like, Garrosh didn't think it was a good idea. And they just kind of hang out, talk, enjoy each other's company for this time where the last matter. And Bane's like, what about Magatha Grimtotem? He's like, yeah, I kept an eye on her. She didn't do much. She didn't seem to get into any trouble. And Cairne mentions, I did see her slip away with Garrosh. And he's like, the Grimtotem may be quiet, but they are never still. And they just kind of laugh. They begin to discuss Garrosh some more. Bane's never met him. He's like, I've heard that he's a magnificent warrior, but also kind of a hothead. And they laugh with each other, and they're like, it's good to be home. And Cairne feels the burden of war finally slip from his shoulders. And that's where we come into the other people in the opposite side of the story. The skies over Stormwind weep with this soft rain as Jaina Proudmoore,
my magic will prevail,
ascends up these cathedral steps. And she looks up and she thinks, well, we're all here to mourn, if the sky must mourn as well, let it. So she makes her way into the Cathedral of Light, this massive cathedral in the center of Stormwind City. And she sees all sorts of different people, dwarves, gnomes, all of the members of the Alliance sitting around. The place is filled to the brim. And she makes her way over towards one of these seats, and they scoot over for her. She sits down, and she's given a candle, where she will then see, entering the cathedral from a different door, King Varian Wrynn.
For the Alliance!
And Prince Anduin. And they make their way over as well to a portion of the room. They're given candles as well, and that is when Archbishop Benedictus approaches the altar, who is the leader of the Church of Light in Stormwind City. And he begins to basically give a sermon talking about how, the war with the Lich King is finally over, thankfully, but I want you guys to look at the candles that you're all holding. And every single one of you that holds a candle needs to understand that each one of these candles doesn't represent 10, 20, 30. It represents 100 lost Alliance lives. And Jaina does a head count. She's like, there's got to be 200 people in this room. And then she's like, there's got to be thousands of people outside. And she gives us the rough estimate that probably 30 to 50,000 Alliance soldiers died in the war with the Lich King.
Wow.
So as they're having this sermon and whatnot, eventually she has her mind drift to Arthas because, well, it's kind of hard to not think about the guy that perpetuated all this being your childhood lover, being the person that you probably at one point thought you were going to be the bride to, right? And, well, other people also don't really let her forget about it because, as they bring up Arthas, as they bring up the Lich King and the war with everything, she does see people kind of eyeballing her and knows that, well, people definitely haven't forgot the relationship that we had before. And as the service is broken, these two sentinels come in. So 2 night elves enter from Ashenvale, and they go to meet with Varian Wrynn. And she stands up to go and meet with Varian as well. It says that they don't even talk to each other, literally, they just look at each other, give each other a nod, and they go into this back room to meet with these sentinels. And as they do go inside, the sentinels give them, well, pretty grim news. They say, we've been ambushed in Ashenvale. A bunch of our sentinels were slaughtered. They were flayed. They were hung from trees, and their skins were marked in blood with symbols of the Horde. And, well, Varian's hands clench into fists of rage as he basically begins to go off. He's like, they broke the treaty. This is war. I'm going to fucking kill them. And Jaina's like thinking about it, and she's like, Thrall would have never condoned this action given the shitty situation that they're in. They're in equally a shitty situation. They lost just as many people in the war with the Lich King. And Varian snaps back at her, and he's like, they're orcs, okay? And I think this is one of the best comebacks that Jaina has ever had for Varian in his hatred for orcs, saying, and the Defias are human. Should you be judged for their sins? And it initially kind of breaks through to Varian, and then he immediately snaps back. And he says, yeah, and you trusted Arthas. Should I really trust your judgment? And, well, they're both just spitting venom at each other. And she kind of lists back. She's like, his father couldn't break through to him. Uther couldn't break through to him. Varian, you were friends with him in his childhood, and you couldn't save him. So, like, what is the point in bringing this up like this? And he just kind of goes like, would you have had the strength to kill him? And she is just reeling for a second by the fact that they're spitting venom at each other. But as he says this, the voice of father rings out after he says it, and he hears his son's call, and his face fills with shame. And he just says, like, go back to the cathedral. We're going to figure out what to do with the Sentinels and the orcs in a bit. And that is kind of where that little confrontation amongst Jaina and Varian comes to its end, with them trying to figure out how to best approach the situation with Thrall and the orcs. And I do actually think this is really interesting, because Jaina does mention what her nightmare was. We didn't get this in the previous novel of Stormrage, of when this nightmare washed over all these places. But Jaina does tell her nightmare was that she did save Arthas. She prevented him from becoming the Lich King, but somehow she becomes the Lich Queen. And, bro, come on, give me this alternate timeline. This would be sick. Come on.
That would be sick. Slow walking frost mage that's also bringing up death at the same time. Oh my gosh.
And this is non-canon. Hearthstone is not canon, but there is an expansion called the Knights of the Frozen Throne that basically has these hero cards for each of the playable classes, and it does turn you into a Death Knight kind of version of each of them. And there's like Frostlord Jaina as one of them, and her ability was awesome. I really loved that expansion. It was such a fun expansion. But yeah, so that is what Jaina's nightmare was at the time. And after this confrontation, Varian does turn back to the Sentinels as Jaina slips away, shaken but composed. And she, instead of going back to sit where she was, just decides to linger at the back of the cathedral as she, sits, as she waits for the rest of this kind of event to come to its end. And when the last candle flickers low, she makes her way back into the side chamber and sits next to Varian Wren. And he looks up at her and he says, I'm sorry. And Jaina's just like, you should be. And Varian was like, yep, I was unfair there. And Anduin didn't deserve to see that. And she's just like, yeah, he didn't. And Varian admits, he's like, sometimes it's really hard to tell where Logosh ends and where Varian begins.
Is it always like this? Is he ever, I don't know, maybe I don't want to spoil, but is he ever combined?
I mean, he is combined, but he does kind of begin to become a less volatile character in that way come the Wolfheart novel, which I believe is about halfway through the Cataclysm.
Okay.
But their conversation shifts back to Ashenvale. Varian says he's like, I'm going to send emissaries to speak with Thrall, and they're just basically, I'm going to give him my demands of what I expect for this situation. And she's like, all right, that's a much better start than you were at before. So then the conversation shifts to Anduin. And Jaina is like, hey, I actually have an idea for Anduin if you're down for it. And he's like, yeah, I think I would be. So as Jaina then makes her way over to Anduin's room, she knocks on the doors and she finds him in there. And they have a brief conversation about everything that's been going on. He offers her tea and they just kind of keep it cordial. And she's like, hey, so I spoke with your father and we think that it would be a good idea with you becoming a teenager now. Anduin at this point is 13 years old. that you should see the world, that you should go and see more parts of the world. And he's like, yeah, Father approved it. She's like, yeah, Father approved it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this Hearthstone. Hey, another Hearthstone in the story. Man, Cataclysm loved bringing Hearthstone into the story.
I mean, they're free.
Like,
they're free,
yeah.
aren't they?
In the lore, at least not. But yeah. So I guess Anduin's officially hit level 1 in the eyes of the video game, and he can now be the proud owner of a Hearthstone as she attunes it, and she says, this will take you to my room in Theramore.
Ooh.
So he's a child. He's a child.
Good for him.
But yes, she's like, okay. Oh, and to remind people, if you haven't seen last episode, Hearthstone is just this magical rock that will teleport you to one specific place. So it'll take you right to me in Theramore, she says. And they joke with each other. He's like, is there dragons still about in the Duskwallow Marsh? And she's like, we have not seen a single dragon in a while. And he's like, damn. So they discuss random things, Dalaran markets, cheese, and whatnot. And as he holds the Hearthstone, he's like, how does it work? And she's just like, it is bound to you whenever you want. You can come and visit me. And he just says, I'll be visiting all the time. And she's like, you know, given the war and everything I just dealt with, that is not even a hardship. I can totally handle that. But that is where you do cut to Duskwallow Marsh, where it is this just still land, no thunder, the swamp winds howl as a dry, uneasy quiet sets over this land and this pale water as these two orcs strode side by side on these wolves through the mud and silence. And the younger one raises up this spyglass and he sees this area known as Tide Fury Cove. So it's one of those really small islands that's off the coast of Theramore in between the bay and like Onyxia's lair and stuff like that. So that is where Tide Fury Cove is. And he looks over there and he's like, she's right on time. So this lone boat approaches the island as they make their way over as well. And hopping off the boat is Jaina Proudmoore. And as she lowers her hood, the other orcs lower their hood, and it is Thrall, and it's Eitrig. And they are basically like, yeah, we definitely need to talk about the incursion. And he's like, yeah, we need to talk about the incursion. And she's like, given the hostility that's going on, I didn't really want to meet you at Razor Hill like we previously have. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. So they discuss the massacre of the Sentinels in Ashenvale, and Thrall confirms that it happens and that he had not given the order, and that the brutality of the skinned bodies and the bloody symbols is infuriating to him. And Jaina is just like, I knew that you would never condone such barbarism. And he says, I don't, but unfortunately, the results have proven popular. And he's basically just saying, I don't approve of it, but given our people's current situation where a lot of our land is drying up, we're running out of wood for our people to build homes, and you know, we need food, and the night elves are refusing to trade with us, so a lot of our people are thinking this is what we should do. We should take it by force. And Jaina is just like, you got Varian's message? He's like, I got Varian's message. And it was basically that he needed to denounce the raid in front of the horde, and to punish those that carried it out, he would have them brought to Varian to face justice. And he's like, I'm not doing that. And she's like, well, if you didn't condone the action, why not? And he's like, because they're horde. And if they need to face justice, they'll face horde justice. And if I were to denounce it in front of everybody, given how much they're struggling right now, it would be political suicide. They would rise up against me. So he refuses the demands of Varian to do so. He says, like, I will acknowledge that I did not give the order, but I will not denounce the horde. And, well, this upsets Jaina. She understands where he's coming from, but also to a degree, she's like, if, like, you don't do this, you could just be leading the horde into more war. And he knows the optics. He knows that the scars have been reopened from the Wrathgate and from Putris and the Undercity and everything like that, and Bolvar Four Dragon's death. So he's like, yes, I will at least acknowledge it, but there will be no apology and there will be no extradition. And it disappoints Jaina. She's like, you have an option to avoid this. Like, we can avoid this. It does not need to come to war. And he says, I lead more than warriors. I lead families. I lead children, refugees, the weak, not just the strong. They need to believe that I protect them. She just basically comes to accept his reasoning, accept that he will not bow to Stormwind, which seems like a pretty fair idea for her. And with that being the case, they speak of their friendship. They speak of all of the years that they worked together. And they're like, if you find another way, any way to fix this, you have to do it. And Thrall just says, we owe it to the ones who still believe in us to do that. We owe it to hope. And with that, this council between the Horde and Alliance, this little meeting, comes to its end with the accepting that the Horde will do what they can to find those responsible, but will not collaborate with the Alliance to do it. As Jaina's boat vanishes off into the marshy fog, you get what probably is the biggest reason that people had Thrall and Jaina being like a weird couple before, because Eitrigg looks off and he says, it's a shame she's not an orc. And Thrall's like, what is a shame? Well, she's smart, she's strong, she's great-hearted, she'd make a fine mate. And he's like, but she's not an orc. And it literally says that Thrall laughs out loud at the idea. And he's just like, yeah, interesting take, buddy. But as this, thankfully has lightened the mood somewhat, they mount their wolves and begin to make their way back to Orgrimmar as well. And he basically discusses with Eitrigg during this ride back to Orgrimmar. He's like, when I founded this horde, I was basically straddled between two worlds, born orc, raised by humans, and that had made me strong. It made me balanced. It made me understand things that other orcs just did not. And he begins to question. He's like, but now I wonder, do I still serve the horde in the same way? Does this still help the same way? And Eitrigg says nothing, leaving him to ponder this idea on his own. And as Jaina makes her way back into Theramore, this conversation with Thrall playing over in her mind as she's thinking about it, no surrender, no apology, only justification. She's like, I fucking hate politics. And as she walks into her room, there's a golden-haired boy kicking his legs in an armchair, grinning like a fox. And it's Anduin. And he's like, Auntie Jaina. He actually does refer to her as Auntie Jaina throughout most of this book. So
He used the Hearthstone?
He used the Hearthstone. And she's like, I literally saw you like 3 days ago. And he's like, you said I could come whenever. And she's like, I did say that you could come whenever. And, well, as they're beginning to share tea, they're laughing with each other. And Anduin's just like, why are you wearing such ugly clothing? And she's like, well, you as a prince probably understand. Like, you don't always want to be seen, probably when you're riding and stuff like that. You don't want people to know who you are. And he's like, I don't mind. Like, the people should see me if I'm going to be leading them one day. And she's like, and he's like, but you know who I think you didn't want people to see you with? Orcs. And it basically makes her cough up her tea while she's in the middle of drinking it. And she's like, how did you know that? And he's like, gotcha. He's like, so what did Thrall say? And she basically tells him, he's like, Thrall refused to condemn the breach. He refuses to apologize for what was done. And then it makes Anduin upset. And he's like, but how does that build trust? And Jaina says, it doesn't, she admits, but it does protect his people. And she just has this long conversation with him about how leadership is often a cage where honor and survival and duty are overruled by the heart. And as Anduin listens closely, absorbing what she is saying, eventually they move on from that topic and they're just like, let's talk about something else. I've had a shitty day. And she's just like, so what's the court gossip? Like, what's been going on in Stormwind? And Anduin's just like, I don't know any court gossip. And she's like, then make some up. Like, I don't care. Come on now, I'm bored. So they just begin to lighten the mood and have a fun little conversation with each other. And, unfortunately, I think this novel, for me, did confirm that regardless of the comics, Aegwynn is dead. Because she does bring up Aegwynn. She does think about Aegwynn. And she's like, I really wish my old mentor was still here. Unfortunately, she has passed. But again, now without the comics, we have no idea how she passed. And at this time, the comics were still canon. But come on, don't leave her in retcon limbo. She deserves better. Bring back Aegwynn.
Wait. Why didn't Arthas raise Aegwynn?
Because Aegwynn channels, like, she basically became nothing. In the comic, she sacrifices herself to give all of her power to the son of Medivh, Medan, who we mentioned is not canon. But with that being the case, I'm pretty sure in that comic, she literally, like, disintegrates into nothing. So, probably not much to bring back. Though, again, a terrifying concept, bro.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, that's a solo raid boss if ever
I'm
I've
thinking
heard
like
of
a
one.
lich. Like,
Ooh. See that action? Oh my god. Give me the alternate timeline where Jaina becomes the Lich Queen and has Aegwynn as her, like, Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah.
Bro. Oh. Oh, Blizzard hired us. We're ready. But yes, as this winds down, back in Stormwind Keep, you have King Varian sitting in his private chamber, staring at the remnants of his food. When Anduin teleports back in, his hair all damp and his cheeks all flushed as he tells his father about where he's been. And he's like, did you have fun with... He's like, I took Jaina's Hearthstone. And he's like, did you now? And he's like, yeah, I did. And it was a lot of fun. And then he thinks back and he's like, I guess we kind of just talked about tea. Or we kind of just had tea and talked with each other. But they do have this really nice meeting between father and son where they're just... You basically see this side of Varian that you really don't ever get to see with anybody else, where he is this supporting father and this loving person. And they have this fun conversation about how just whatever Anduin wants to get up to. And he asked, like, did you see any orcs? And he's like, no, but she did. And Varian kind of does put this together of what it means. And Anduin is just like looking outside and he's like, the Varian is still kind of lost in his thought as he's thinking about the Sentinels and the bloodshed in Ashenvale. And despite everything that they're trying to solve, like at the end of the day, the blood has already been drawn and something will probably need to be done. Anduin tells Varian, he's like, their children didn't ask for this. He's like, their people suffer too. And Varian is just kind of silent as he lets his son speak to him in this regard. And eventually they move on from that subject. And Varian's like, hey, you know how we said that you should probably see more of the world? He's like, yeah. He's like, I think you should go visit the dwarfs in Ironforge and spend time with King Magni to learn their ways. And Anduin's face lights up, and he's like, yeah, I've always liked the dwarves. I always respected them. I would love to meet the Explorer League and get to see all that they're doing over in Ironforge. And he's like, awesome. So we'll get you headed over as soon as the sun rises tomorrow. And he's like, awesome, thanks. And he's like, and if I ever need to come back, I can just take the Deep Run Tram. So I guess the Deep Run Tram is truly canon. Good to know. But with that, Varian smiles and thinks to himself, he's like, but I'm also going to tell Magni that I need him to train my son in battle, because as we've kind of mentioned, Anduin isn't really like a warrior. He doesn't really like fighting like that, but Varian, when he was raised up, like, he went and studied with the dwarves in combat. He went and trained with all sorts of people in combat. Even by the time that he was like 14 and he met Arthas, he had already trained with all sorts of different people. So he kind of wants that for Anduin as well. So he's like, I'm going to privately speak with Magni about training to be a warrior. And as the war still looms overhead and the threat of everything going on is still tense, they have this one peaceful moment. And that is where we're going to call this episode as we move into some of the bigger orc plot lines in the next episode.
I enjoyed this episode more. No overpowered archdruids just snapping a finger and saving the world. I liked it.
Yeah, I try not to compare too much, but you guys know this. I've mentioned it plenty of times before. I think Christy Golden writes the best novels. I think she makes the characters feel very alive, feel very human, feel very like an actual person that exists. And a lot of Knack stories, they have great action scenes, but when it comes to the lore, like, it's kind of hard to describe action scenes. It's a lot easier to describe character growth and describe the emotion and whatnot.
Well, and that's what's happening
so
in this one, right? It's not just...
Yeah. So I love Christy Golden's novel. I'm excited to move on into some of the other stories that we're going to get into with this story. And yeah, if you guys did make it this far and you're enjoying our content, please make sure to drop us a sub. We're really trying to push our way up to 1,000 subscribers so we can fully get our YouTube partnership. If you're over there on Spotify, you guys have been crushing it. Drop us a follow. Give us those 5-star ratings. And thank you just again for all your support. It's been truly amazing to see how much this channel's been growing. Your guys' awesome comments has really been driving us through any challenges that we've had with making our content is vastly overwhelmed by your guys' amazing support. So thank you so much, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.